Welcome back to Enjoy Parenting. My usual guest host, Kyle Steele, is under the weather today. So I have the honor of a special guest, Mark Pellegrino, who has agreed to join me and talk about the challenges of step parenting, a challenge I think we have both faced in our own lives. I'm not a step parent myself, but I have gone through divorce and remarriage. And so my husband is step parent to my eldest two children. So Mark, do you want to tell us about a little bit about your personal history with step parenting? How many step kids do you have? And
Two. They are now adults, but
okay.
still kids in my eyes, unfortunately. I met my wife. I'd known my wife for a long time previous while she was married, but we didn't have a relationship until after she was separated.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't start one any time before that. Just so people know, it wasn't a sordid affair. It was
That's scandalous.
Yes, it wasn't scandalous. It was a relationship that grew after she was separated, and our friendship developed into something more. And eventually, of course, we got married. And I don't. This is sort of unusual, I suppose, to be a figure in a kid's life from the beginning, basically, but but changing contexts over time. And so I became, I went from the friend who knew everybody to the boyfriend to husband.
Okay.
So that in itself might be an unusual transition for kids to have to make.
Mm.
And then and so that sort of sets the playing field.
Okay.
And I don't.
And so they were from the beginning. So they were babies. You knew them from the time they were babies.
Right. I knew them both
Okay.
from the time they were babies.
And at what age? What age were they when you became stepfather?
Um, when I became stepfather, that was 2008 technically,
Mm-hmm.
but I was when I was living with Tracy, the 2005. So I would
Okay.
say one of the kids was about 15, 14.
Okay.
The other one was 7.
Okay. So I solicited questions from people about the challenges of step parenting. I have some of those. I have some general thoughts myself. So I could just start us off by sharing a few of those thoughts and seeing what you have to add to that. And then we can go to some of the questions that I've been asked. How's that
Okay,
sound?
sure,
Okay.
sure. I just want to say to begin, I
Mhm.
think step parenting is a really, really complicated alchemy, right?
Yes.
I think it's probably the hardest territory to negotiate
Mhm.
um, in the world. I mean, I think it's almost impossible. And the only thing that makes it somewhat bearable is if the actual parents, are on the same page,
Mhm.
not enemies with each other, not trying to use the kids as fodder
Mhm.
for their own arguments.
Mhm.
Even in those best of circumstances, it's probably very hard. And I did not have those best of circumstances. So I'd like
Mhm.
to talk about how to negotiate territory when one parent is uncooperative, when one parent is trying to X out the other parent from the child's life, using the kids as a wedge, emotional wedge. And I'd like to see what thoughts are with respect to negotiating that.
Okay. Well, we can start with that if you want to, because I went through something similar myself. Mine was an acrimonious divorce. There wasn't. It was more silence than it was direct conflict. But in a way, I think that was almost worse. I was just sort of cut off as a person, and my ex-husband didn't even want to make eye contact with me after that. So we were just trying to kind of negotiate this situation where we were inhabiting entirely separate worlds with children shared between us. And that was extraordinarily difficult. So in a way that feels more hostile than direct hostility to me. So I certainly feel like I've been through a situation of intense hostility too. And I think one of the lessons for me coming out of that was exactly that to the extent it's possible, your number one goal, if you're going to go through divorce, it does have a profound and terrible impact on children. I have no doubt about that. I feel like when I was a child and divorce was just becoming almost the norm, it became normalized in a way that and justified as, ultimately it's best for the kids too, because they need to grow up in an environment where their parents are happy and they're modeling a successful relationship and that sort of thing. And I think there's truth to that, but I also feel like a corollary of that was the consequences to children's psyches was sort of glossed over. And I think that there's just no avoiding the trauma of that impact.
There isn't. Now, did you and your ex agree to abide by the same rules? Have the same rules for each house, the same rules for bringing up the kids? No,
there was no cooperation or agreement. So it was separate worlds where the kids were just sort of go-betweens in these two separate worlds. So I wish that had been the case. I would have done anything for that to be the case. I wish if I could, rewrite history, that's the way things would be. But you can only, under those circumstances, you can only do the best you can within your own little world.
Right. And we actually tried to get those circumstances. We spoke to, and I did extensively spoke to the father and her ex and said, look, we should all be on the same page with respect to how we're dealing with the kids. He refused.
Okay.
He also thought that the children should have the ability to make a choice between parents. So if they wanted to stay with them, which set up a very toxic atmosphere. So if a child was unhappy with something that was going on in one house, they could easily go to another. Yeah. And it set up a kind of unconscious, at times, competition with each other that doesn't serve the children at all, because you end up trying to pander in a certain way to the kid, as opposed to establish rules and structure so that the kid can function within those and probably be happier.
Yeah. So to draw a principle out here to the extent we can. So there's a lot that's out of your control, of course. We agree that there's a lot at stake in a situation like that. And it's something to be taken very seriously and with the well-being of the children firmly in mind. That said, doing anything you possibly can to maintain a harmonious relationship with your ex and to agree to work towards agreement on common rules so that the kids aren't sort of shifting from one totally different universe to another. It sounds like that's what you're suggesting is a goal that should be worked toward.
I do think that. I also think that there should be long periods of time where the child is with the other parent. We had the unique experience. I don't know if this was with you. The ex is a psychiatrist, so this makes everything that he's done far more horrible in my view. But he refused to shift his schedule around so that we had to move with the kids daily, right? So we had to take them back to where he lived every other day. He refused to not, go very long without seeing them, which of course means the kids can't effectively bond or feel safe in the other place, or at least that's the vibe I got. And so that creates a lot of I want to say like insecurity, like
instability,
insecurity and instability. Even though they're going from one home to another and the homes are established, they don't feel that sense of home. At least I think it's harder for them to feel a sense of home where where there's a step parent and it's a stranger in that respect.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of discussion over scheduling, whether it's week on, week off, or more frequent switching back and forth. And I think arguments can be made in favor of different schedules, but what, as you're describing that, it seems to me like if they don't feel like it's such a jarring juxtaposition of worlds, like I'm really leaving one world entirely and going into another one, and if there's not a lot of tension involved in moving from one house to another, because they know there's harmony between the divorced parents, then it seems like that's the number one condition that you can create to give them that sense of stability and harmony. If it feels like there's some kind of unity among the divorced parents, despite their being divorced, unity and harmony and cooperation and kindness, that's going to set the terms for the best success. And so when I have friends who have gotten divorced under really unpleasant circumstances, where somebody cheated on them and left them for the person they cheated, I mean, really just awful situations, I still encourage them to put that all behind them for the sake of the kids and just look forward and focus on what you can do to create that harmony and stability with your ex for the sake of the children moving forward.
Yeah, that's really living rationally. and that was a lot to ask for this psychiatrist. I guess he didn't want to go there.
Yeah. Well, so some of the things that we can come back to this topic. It seems like a painful and complex one. Mm-hmm. Some of the things I wanted to talk about have to do more with what's within your control. So a lot of those things, it sounds like, you can only keep your own side of the street clean. So I guess the question is, what does it mean to be a good step parent? Those are the sorts of things I've been thinking about. And these are somewhat at random, but one thing that occurred to me, and I'd be interested in your thoughts, is I was just rereading The Comprachicos by Ayn Rand for a discussion I had with James Valiant a couple of days ago. And there was this passage that had nothing to do with step parenting, but it really struck me in that context. So in the article, she was actually talking about teachers who put on this kind of phony show of affection that the kids can read right, see right through. So I'm just going to read the quote real quick. It says, animals, infants, and small children are exceedingly sensitive to emotional vibrations. It is their chief means of cognition. A small child senses whether an adult's emotions are genuine and grasps instantly the vibrations of hypocrisy. The teacher's mechanical crib-side manner, the rigid smile, the cooing tone of voice, the clutching hands, the coldly unfocused, unseeing eyes, this is a very damning description, add up in a child's mind to a word he will soon learn: phony. He knows it's a disguise. A disguise hides something. He experiences suspicion and fear. So the reason this occurred to me is that it seems one of the most important things I think that a step parent can do is to be honest about the nature of the relationship. So it could be tempting to step into the role of step parent and put on a pretense that you have the same level of attachment to your stepchildren that you do to your own children you've known since birth, that you feel a certain kind of earned authority over them that hasn't yet quite been earned, I guess. So just kind of insert, because, this, for the child, this is a new and big and substantial almost imposition. They didn't choose this relationship. It just sort of descends on them. I think it's really important. Well, it's important in life in general, but especially important in dealing with children under these sensitive circumstances to be honest about the nature of the relationship and let the relationship develop naturally over time. I sometimes see parents really trying to play the role of parent right from the start, either in terms of disciplining them or making this pretense of a love and attachment to a degree or a depth that they don't quite feel. And I know kids can sense that and are turned off by that if that's the vibe they're getting from the step parent.
I couldn't agree more. And I knew this intuitively. I didn't know it as as an explicit concept, but he remarried before Tracy and I married, a few years before we married, and his wife is a social worker, so they're both in the mental health field, and we would be confronted constantly with what I felt was an inappropriate assumption of the role of mother on her part. And I hated that. I thought it was terrible. I never presumed that I was their father. I never tried to act like I was their father. I understood the difficult position that a stepfather is in is you're not a friend and you're not a parent. You're none of those things. And so what you can do is establish some form of connection to whatever extent you can. Offer guidance when it's needed, support if you can. And that's pretty much what I tried to do without assuming the role of father, knowing that I couldn't fulfill that role. And this particular fact would become explicit to me whenever I would talk to someone, even them, about something political or a current event. I was so on the opposite side of their father. They would take things that I said as an attack against their father.
Oh, interesting.
He's a Marxist. And so I had to sit the son down and say, look, I have a great deal of respect for your father's mind. He's a psychiatrist, he's a doctor, he's accomplished. I have my own opinions and feelings about things that I've thought through considerably. When I am talking about a topic like this, I am not indirectly attacking your dad. I want you to know I'm not indirectly attacking it. I'm not trying to take over his place and guide you to my way of thinking. That would have been nice, but I explicitly had that talk.
That's great. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Which paid off, I think, later, not in the moment.
Yeah.
But 10 years down the line, I think, and seeing how my stepson has developed, he's a lot more open to me than I think he was in the past.
Yeah, because you showed that patient. You made it clear it wasn't an adversarial. You weren't engaging in an adversarial relationship with his father. You were just sharing your own thoughts. You were being patient about his development, not trying to impose your views or your authority over him. And that just seems really crucially important to me. I can see how a parent might think it might come from a good place that might be well-meaning, that they think, well, now I've stepped into this role in this child's life. I have this responsibility. I want to show them that I care about them. And in an effort to kind of fulfill this, I mean, we even stepfather, it's almost like we need different terms than stepfather and stepmother, because we're not stepping in in the role of father and mother. It's a distinct role of its own. But I could see it coming from a good place, that they want to show, I'm here for you as in this parent role, and I do have this deep affection for you, but it has to match the reality of the situation, or the kid's going to be onto it. And the thing is, well-meaning expressions of affection provoke as much mistrust as negative treatment.
Can I tell you of one instance where I think I did that very thing?
Yeah.
So of course the ex set up a situation where the kids could choose. Which I thought was awful, and I tried to talk him out of this, that he would not be moved. The son chose to move over there. Okay. At a particular point, there was an issue with the daughter, where she moved over there for a time, and then he tried to sue for custody, and I countersued him, and he ended up backing out. Okay. Then Tracy and I had to move to Vancouver to do some work, and the daughter decided to go with us. Okay. Now I said I was against this. I said, I don't think this is good. I think we're living in the world that he's created, but this is not a good thing. But I couldn't stop it. So when it happened, it was the one time that I chose to say something bad about the father. Now, in all the years that I'd known this child, I'd never said word one to her about her father. Because I thought that was terrible. And I think the other side was doing it with us, but I didn't do it. But when she left for us, he had her room moved and made into an office, which I thought was a terrible rejection. And he didn't speak to her. Now, we didn't do this to the son when he moved. We kept his room. We kept it. The same way it was. We hoped that he would one day come back, and we tried to persuade him gently. The place is always open for you, but we never rejected him. So she was 15 or 16, and surging hormones and going down the tubes. Like, I saw her nearly suicidal, And so I sat down with her. I said, look, your dad is dead wrong right now. It's wrong what he did. I think he's a jerk for doing it. He set up this situation where the kids could choose. We did not want this situation, but he created it. And now he's taking it out on you.
Yeah.
I just want you to know he is responsible for this. Well, I thought I was doing the right thing. Turns out later on, when she comes back and then sort of goes to school and adopts his worldview, in a sense, I now became the enemy for saying that stuff. With all the intention of saving her life, because that's what I thought I was doing. I thought she was so despondent because she was really enmeshed with him. I think in a, I guess, a way daughters are enmeshed with their fathers, but I had no idea that I did damage.
Yeah, well, that's a fascinating and really difficult and sounds like painful situation. So I immediately start to think, well, what would be the right way to handle that? It sounds hard no matter what, but I guess part of it is that there aren't any shortcuts. There aren't any shortcuts of explanation. There aren't any shortcuts of maturity. There aren't any shortcuts of relationship development. So I guess, I mean, you were concerned for her welfare, and you have to do something to act on that concern. But I guess the best thing you can do is just be there, available, present to her, and sort of let her set the terms of it. You were trying to kind of maybe jump ahead steps and get to an understanding that she wasn't ready to reach, and the consequence was alienating to her. So what do you think, and if you could go back and do it again now, what do you think you would do differently?
I mean, there were things that I did do that I think were more appropriate. Like one time she was just so upset. She just came into the room and just fell into my arms, and I just stayed there and held her. And I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And we stayed there for probably an hour, and she was just bawling.
Yeah.
And I didn't move. And I thought later on, before she went back home, and I think he worked on her too. He was very clever. He let the stepmother do a lot of the dirty work, and he just went along with it. He was able to fly above the fray in a very clever way. So he never looked like he was manipulating things, but he really was. And he might have said something to her. I know that he showed his son an email that I had sent him shortly after his stepmother did something embarrassing to my wife. And I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you, dude? I was like, she's the mother of your children. Act like a man and tell your wife to not embarrass the mother of your children in front of her friends. I mean, just be a man. If I said, I don't like you, dude, but I wouldn't treat you like I don't like you in front of your kids. He showed that email to his son. Son's explanation, son's context, I'm sure, which is something I never would have done. So I'm sure he worked on her a little bit and influenced the way she looked at that.
Yeah.
Right. And then later on, as she went to college, she got a degree, and she's now going to Columbia, the belly of the beast. We had moments where, she would tell her mom something she was reading, and I would suggest, here's a few scholars to give you some just a different perspective if you're interested. And she would take that as an offense, as me trying to pull her, manipulate her way of thinking, and that became extremely strong after she came back. So I think he was doing something behind the scenes. Anyway.
Yeah. So again, it seems that, okay, Kyle Steele and I we did a couple of episodes on a book we read called Hold On to Your Kids. And the premise of it was really fascinating and had a big impact on both of us. And the basic premise was that to properly parent, what you need is not tips and tricks and techniques and skills, and that there's this whole industry that's treating it like that's what's needed. So if you're, having trouble managing your kids, read this rule book and it'll give you all the guidance you need. And the thesis of this book is that that's wrong, that effective parenting really just depends on an attachment relationship with the parent. If you have a certain context, a certain relationship context with that child, they're inherently going to look to you for guidance. They're going to listen to your wisdom. They're going to care about your approval. And that's what you should be working. That's what you should be working on, is the nature of the relationship and the development of this sort of attachment, and not any specific tricks and rules. So, and then the corollary of this principle is that kids need that sense of attachment. If they don't get it from you, they're going to look for it somewhere else. And the place they're most likely going to find it is among their peers, which introduces a whole range of disastrous consequences. So it's really interesting. But the relevant thing here seems to be that the child does have that attachment probably with their mother and father, even if there have been breaches of trust. And, it takes a lot to destroy that sense of attachment. So when a step parent comes in, that attachment doesn't exist. They can't depend on that. They can't rely on the child naturally gravitating toward them for guidance, because they don't have that attachment relationship. So it seems like what you can do as a step parent is just recognize that fact. And as you said, in the situation that you're proud of and happy about in retrospect, just be there as a source of support that in a way that will create that sense of attachment over time, but understanding that that's going to be a very long range proposition, and not try to force or shortcut the desire to have them turn to you for guidance when the conditions for that just don't exist yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I feel glad, not glad. I feel a little bit more enlightened about one thing, which is I don't think I ever tried to make myself more than what I was. And there were some times when I had guilt and shade thrown at me because I wasn't, my relationships with them weren't unconditional, and especially as they got older, and I would get a little shade thrown at me for that. And I said, hey man, I'm not you, and the relationship is conditional with me, especially as they get older. When they became adults, it was entirely conditional. So something has happened between me and this stepdaughter now, and I resent it. I resent what's happened. She has ghosted me, and it started with she's an adult. It started with a dog issue. She wanted to get a dog, and a dog that Tracy and I had found on the street, and then we found the owner and we returned it back, but the dog kept escaping. There was a possibility that maybe we would take it in, and I hope I'm not burying you in concretes, but she wanted this dog, and I said, okay, here's the deal. I don't want the dog. Okay. Because every animal that we've ever gotten, I end up taking care of. I said, I don't want to do that. I said, I'll take care of your dog when you're doing exams or when you have to go away, but ownership now is yours. You're entirely responsible for the dog. So she gave the dog back and ghosted me. And then there was a couple other incidents with an academic thing that I just told you about, that she just decided I'm not in her world. Because of that, I said, this is a despicable thing to do. I said, she hasn't talked. She hasn't. I said this to my wife. She hasn't talked to me. I think I deserve to be at least filled in as to why she's decided our relationship is now on this different level. I cooked dinner for her every night. I helped her with her homework. I drove her to and from school. I taught her how to ride a goddamn bike. I'm not some jack-off stranger. And she's treated me like I don't deserve the respect of a common courtesy of a stranger. I said, I do not like her. And I'm not going to make any bones about that, because what she's done is shitty. And I'm not going to talk to her until she apologizes and comes clean. Now, I've gotten shade for that. But to me, you can tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, it sounds like a really difficult situation. I mean, it sounds like a complex situation, so it'd be hard for me to judge from the outside. My instincts are to show more patience and to to accept that there's a lot going on psychologically, probably that's behind whatever conflicts or behaviors you're seeing. So I'm going to give you now. Ordinarily, we stop here at 11:30. I don't know if we're on any specific time schedule, and then we go over to Clubhouse. Are you available to go to Clubhouse to continue the conversation
Yeah,
too?
sure.
Okay. So we'll just, I'll just wrap up this issue and then we can move over to Clubhouse.
Okay.
And Dylan, you can tell me if I need to cut things short. So there's a story that I've published before that was one of the most touching and meaningful stories of my parenting life, and involves step parenting too. And it was the story of my wedding to my husband, Chad. My daughter, Greta, was absolutely distraught about this wedding. I had gotten divorced when she was about 3. She and her sister and I, as they grew older, we watched Gilmore Girls together. Gilmore Girls was sort of our, it felt like us reflected. We just had this little world that felt like the 3 of us. And this was somebody coming in and intruding in that and taking over. And it felt, I'm sure, uncomfortable to them to have this utterly new relationship sort of thrust upon them. And so there was lots of fear and pain and trauma involved with that situation for her. And her way of dealing with it was to act out in a major way. And especially on the very day of the wedding, she was really upset. She said lots of very angry, cruel things to me.
How old was she?
Wedding. She was about 10, I think, when we got married. And she, to the point that we had a brunch the day after the wedding, and I was not able to attend the brunch because I stayed behind with her because she was having such a hard time. So that was devastating to me because, of course, I looked to this wedding as being the celebration of love and a beautiful time and all the family come together. And it was in many ways, but this was really a painful part of the whole experience for me. And there was one time that I just lost it myself, broke down sobbing. And Chad came to me and said, if what you're worried about is that this makes our wedding or our marriage or our relationship any less perfect, it doesn't. And he said, what I want is real relationships, not phony, perfect relationships. So if this is what Greta is feeling right now, then this is what she needs to feel. And we have to, work through that and try to get to the bottom of what's causing those emotions and give her time and allow her to mature and give her time to say, whatever we need to, this is life. This is part of life. Now, obviously there's a boundary. She was a child, not an adult, as you're saying, and there's a boundary that a person can cross, at which point you have to kind of sever ties or expect apologies or, no longer accept the terms of the relationship. But because there's such complexity in the nature of the relationship, I would want to be careful to really set a high bar for cutting off the relationship, and really have as much patience and understanding as I could, just because there have to be, and I guess invite the opportunity. The most important thing I think any of us can do in relationships is invite the opportunity for the person to truly reveal what it is that's going on underneath the behaviors. So it sounds like maybe she hasn't gotten to the point of recognizing what's underneath and motivating behaviors, but because that's so hard for people and because it's not something I think we're brought up with or taught in a meaningful way, I'd like to see that done more. We really have to give people a clear understanding that we want to know what's underneath it, that the behavior may not be acceptable, the behavior on the surface, but we're here ready to listen, be available, and understand if they want to get underneath it and confess what they're really afraid of, what they're really angry about, what's really making them unhappy.
I feel like that is easier to swallow as medicine when the kid is 10.
Yeah.
But when the kid's 23, then I
Yeah.
feel like you're an adult, you're responsible. Did you learn anything from me, or did you learn anything from your other parent figures about the way you treat people who are supposed to be important human beings in your life?
Yeah.
And it's revealing to me something about her character that is deep. Now, you may be right, and I'm going to entertain that idea. That now I am open to her explanation. I do want to hear it. I do want that. I'm just mad. I'm mad because I feel like I've been betrayed. I feel like I lived with a terrible stepfather. I mean, a man who beat my dog in front of me, and who punched my mother and terrorized me emotionally until I was 15 years old. I consciously, worked at being a decent human being to her. Not that I have to work at that. I have an affinity, I think, for kids and beings that are helpless and need you to help them. But I felt like I deliberately steered clear of any malevolence at all, and did not present that into her world at all. I knew there was not 1 second where she feared me, couldn't talk to me, couldn't ask me for something that I wouldn't be there for her.
Yeah. Well, what you just said sounds to me like the best scenario, just to be angry and open. And if that's the message that can get across, that seems like, if you want the prospect of reconciliation, that seems like the best way to do it. Not to deny your own feelings about the situation, but also to really open the door for honest exploration of what's going on underneath it. That seems like one of the challenges of step parenting.
So hard.
All right. Well, let's see. Should we move over to Clubhouse?
Sure.
I think I kind of want to revisit. I don't know if you want to come back and talk again, but I would like to revisit this topic because I'd like to get to, we have to kind of get in the weeds and then draw principles away from what the experience is that might guide somebody who's going to face this situation themselves. I know some of the questions that I got were from people who may in the future be facing the challenge of step parenting. And I'd love to draw upon our own experiences and extract what wisdom we can. I think these situations are extraordinarily complex. It's not going to be a one size fits all solution, but certainly there are things that you and I have both experienced that could inform somebody going into this situation. So
for sure.
If you're available to come back and do it again, I'd love that.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I will see you on Clubhouse.
See you on Clubhouse.